I never go bowling. And I did on Friday. It's random. On a cold, wintry night, it was probably as cold as it is in here, in December, I sat shoulder to shoulder with Summit residents and clergy at a city zoning meeting. It's, one heck of a night. Habitat for Humanity that night was getting approval for their affordable housing project, and so we were all showing up to support their efforts here in Summit. On the agenda, however, prior to Habitat was a couple. They were seeking approval to restore their historical home, just the sort of thing that the zoning board likes to hear about, projects they like to approve. And their architect was well known and well prepared, and I was ready for them to just fly through this decision. But there was just one thing. The walkway from the front of the couple's house to their backyard ran through their neighbor's property. Now, both neighbors had bought the property recently with the full knowledge that this walkway did this. However, the zoning board likes to resolve these issues, so the zoning officer had asked the petitioning couple to get permission from their neighbor for the walkway to continue through their property. It could have been as simple as an email saying, "Will you please give me permission?" However, it seemed that the husband could only see two options. He either got to do what he wanted without addressing the issue, or he had to get a lawyer. Only those two things were possible. Because what he said to the zoning board was, "Why are you requiring me to get lawyers involved with my neighbors?" And the zoning board was saying, "We're not. We're asking you to get permission." But for him, there was no middle ground. Even when the middle path was told to him, he just couldn't see it or hear it. And this led to the husband and a particular zoning board member shouting at each other, both fist banging. The zoning board meeting went from really, really boring to very exciting all of a sudden. However, as you can imagine, the renovation project did not proceed. And it caused me to wonder about how we live and work together. And is there a path between doing what you want and getting lawyers involved? Sorry to all the lawyers in the room, I do really want you to have business, but is there a middle road where we could work out how we live together? Now, a middle road can be found at Haverford College. Do we have any Haverford College graduates just outside of Philadelphia? Small college. So the Haverford Code is an honor code, but it's not simply a longer list of rules, but it's a philosophy of conduct about how people behave that allows members of a diverse student body to live together, to interact, to learn more from one another in the ways that both protect their personal freedoms but also protect the community standards. So you should know that they're quite serious about this honor code, that students receive an orientation to the code each year, and it is reviewed, amended, and ratified each year by all the members of the Haverford community, its staff, its students, its faculty. Now, how does that show up in their lives? Well, the code, one of the things that the code emphasizes is speaking directly to the person that you have differences with or disagreements with. For instance, one student in the Haverford community called the police to complain about a noisy party that was happening just a couple of doors down. The police arrived and dealt with it. But afterwards, there were a number of persons that were held responsible by the code. Yes, the people who held the party. Yes, the people who were underage drinking. And yes, the person who called the police. Because in the code, you're supposed to first go and deal with it directly, asking your neighbors, could they please turn down the music? So all of them received some time where they were held responsible. The honor code teaches the Haverford community the middle way first, and I wondered how life would have been different for the husband had he had such a teaching. But let's give him credit. This is not what we are taught to do. Our larger culture has no honor code to follow, or not just one honor code. We have multiple honor codes. Not right now. In fact, as Daniel said, historians William Strauss and Neil Howe say that our country is going through a particular time. From its beginnings to now, we have experienced a cycle of generations. It's a reoccurring pattern, one you can see up here, that from our founding, we have had highs, followed by awakenings, followed by unraveling, followed by a crisis that they can point to again and again and again. Just right now, in your own mind, think, which one are we in? Don't say anything. So, having experienced the crisis of the Second World War, our country moved into a period of harmony and community solidarity. But then, of course, the 1960s and 70s happened, which was a time of revolution, a time of awakening the individual spirit, which then led to our current culture wars and the phase of unraveling. And that's where supposedly we are living right now, in the phase of unraveling. Just don't look at the next phase. Because it's just don't look at that. I'm holding that part off right now. So our cultural values rest at the very foundation of our daily behaviors as people. And if our culture is at war, then our behaviors are at war as well. When multiple cultures are at war, then multiple truths are right. Think about the judge in the story. And it's a time of unraveling because people don't know how to act and how to be together. Professor Nicholas Mills calls it the triumph of meanness. You see that every day? He writes, for an increasing percentage of the country, the obligations to nationhood have turned into a burden, and what the culture of meanness has supplied is the justification for those who feel this way. The way is to shed their connection with everyone, but people who are like themselves. And then you enter congregations. One of the last places in America where people can experience community. As I've said to you on many times, when new people walk through the doors, one of the first things they tick on the box of, why have you come? I am seeking community. So the questions become, will we succumb to a community of just like-minded people where we're all the same because we don't know how to be in difference with one another? Or will we be countercultural? A community that honors differences, that holds together in the face of unraveling. And Gil Rendell reminds us that people of faith have been here before in he calls it his handbook for honoring differences. He retells the story of the Israelites. That's why I asked Steve to read a passage from the book of Exodus, because these are people who are in a state of unraveling. They don't know if they're supposed to honor the golden calf or the God and who God is. They have no idea what to do. Rendell reminds us that in this time of unraveling, of wilderness, of exile, displacement of old behaviors, of traditions, of practices, left people feeling empty and not knowing where to find meaning in the absence of a functioning Jerusalem. Have you had empty days where the traditions of maybe your childhood don't really mean the same that they once did? I was just thinking about this over the Christmas holiday because I was wondering, how can I celebrate if there are no gifts? And I just didn't know what to do. Now, there's lots of answers out there, but I experienced this moment of just emptiness. Enter the book of Leviticus. Walter Brueggemann, one of the most influential biblical interpreters of our time, says, what is most important is that these displaced people, for whom almost everything is out of control, set out to reorder and recover life through an intentional resolve about, for them, a communion of God. They set out to answer the question, how are we supposed to be together? What are our practices? The book of Leviticus is their honor code. Has anybody read the book of Leviticus besides Steve and Jermaine? I just want to say, it might not be the book for us to figure out. It might not be our honor code, but to understand that people have been figuring out honor codes throughout time as they experience a time of unraveling, which leads me to the question of, what is our honor code here at Beacon? What are our practices for how we're going to be together? And before we get there, let me first ask you, if we were to sit down in this room and I asked you, what is your personal honor code? What promises have you made to yourself? I imagine we'd find a whole slew of promises, some of which would disagree with one another. And then I would ask you, what promises have you made to the people you love? Here are some when I put it out on Facebook, the responses that I got. I will cultivate joy each day. I promise to finally dig into my finances. I will give myself the gift of sobriety. I will listen more, speak less, even when I disagree with you. And finally, my favorite, I promise to laugh at your jokes. I will also tell you when your jokes are hurtful. Both are pretty hard. Unitarian Universalist minister Victoria Safford writes, to act in these ways is to give our word. Such a commitment does not predict the future or set it in stone. You don't have to do it. You can fail. But it makes a certain kind of future possible. And I like that. It makes a certain kind of future possible. Because so often in congregations we talk about visions and missions. What does that really mean? Well, what kind of future do we want to envision? That is our vision. What actions will make it real? That is our mission. But how will we work together as we make it happen? That's our promise to one another. And so Unitarian Universalists are people of the promise. I often say to newcomers, we are people of right relationship, not right belief. Because as our starting point participants will learn today at 12:15, our beliefs have evolved greatly over time. When you go back to 1825, it looks so different from the way it looks today. But our covenant remains to walk together across disagreement, dissent, difficult discernments, and that we will cherish the way we walk together as much as the outcome. And that's the deepest part of Unitarian Universalism. It goes all the way back to 1630. Are you ready to go on a ship with me? The soon-to-be governor of Massachusetts, John Winthrop, said these words to his fellow Puritans, the forefathers and mothers of American Unitarianism, as they sailed to New England from aboard the ship called the Arabella. He said, "Now the only way to avoid shipwreck is to follow the counsel of Micah, to do justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with our God." And this is how he translated it. He said, we must delight in each other. We must make other conditions our own conditions. We must rejoice together and mourn together and labor and suffer together, always having before our eyes our commission and our community in our work, our community as members of the same body. So shall we keep the unity of spirit and the bond of peace. Now he meant this, the only way to avoid shipwreck. He meant that literally, but he also meant it spiritually. If we are not going to tear each other apart on this ship when we are afraid we are going to die, we have to be for one another. We have to keep our promises. And let me tell you, this journey across this ocean will test us. Now, I get why people are angry with religious communities. It's because they walk through the door expecting, hoping, and praying that they'll experience something different than they see in their daily lives. How many of you hope that when you walk in? And then, Chris especially, and then sometimes they walk in through the doors of congregations and they experience the culture of meanness. Or they experience the culture of niceness. Like we're so nice that we're never going to do anything that provides conflict, and you must conform to everything we say. Is there not a middle path? So I ask again, what is our honor code here at Beacon? When we first introduced the leadership team, there were many naysayers. The leadership team is Robin, Tooley, and I as the head implementing our strategic plan. There were so many naysayers. Some people called it the three-headed monster, right? They said, you can't have two called ministers and one non-ordained religious professional leading an organization. You're going to constantly be in a battle of 2 versus 1. How will you make decisions? Who's going to be the right one? Right? And rightly so. I think all of these criticisms were right. Our dominant culture doesn't live this way. There's always got to be one right person. But we are attempting in our leadership model to live differently, to be countercultural, to find a middle way. And to do so, our leadership team lives by a covenant. One that we created together. I will tell you, we created it at a bar, on our retreat, over a piece of flourless chocolate cake. The cake is still actually sort of smudged on the side of the paper. And each week, each and every week, the 3 of us meet and we read our covenant out loud. And that request was for me from the very beginning, because every week I would forget my promises. Oh yeah, I said I'd do that. It's hard, but the same is true of marriage and of friendships and of parenting. Anyone have a hard week where you forgot your promises? Then you read your promises again and you decide whether or not you're going to recommit. That's why many congregations read out loud their congregational covenant every Sunday. In Victoria Safford's congregation, they say aloud the covenant written by James Vila Blake in 1894. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. In Austin, Texas, they get down to the brass tacks. They say we promise to nurture and protect by speaking when silence would inhibit progress, by disagreeing from a place of curiosity and respect, by interrupting hurtful interactions when we witness them. Yet our congregation here at Beacon does not have a covenant. Yes, we honor the 7 principles, which lots of people call our beliefs, but is actually the covenant of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Yes, many of our groups have both aspirational and behavioral covenants. All of our children, all of our youth create and recreate them year in and year out. Yet when people, new members, come into the congregation, they'll often ask, what is promised of me? What am I promising? What is expected? And I can't give them an answer because we haven't created it. Over the next few months, from now until June, we will engage in a process of conversations about the promises that we make to one another when we join this community. We will endeavor to answer these questions. How shall we live together in this age of unraveling, and maybe in the age of crisis? What promises and behaviors will we offer to one another while we live and search and experiment together? And I have to tell you this because I can't create the covenant for you. We have to create it together. And we need all of your divergent voices coming to the table. Victoria Safford tells a story about a lifelong member who came to see her the first weeks of her first ministry in an old New England congregation. Nearly 90 years old, her parents had joined in the late 19th century. She said she didn't like change. Just remember, she said, I've outlived all of your predecessors. And I will probably outlive you. This woman was a dedicated political conservative in what had become a progressive community. She was a liberal Christian in a congregation that had known gracious eras of theological diversity and also some fits of intolerance. She'd worked for the U.S. State Department through 3 wars and for the American Unitarian Association through the merger with the Universalist Church of America. Most votes at her congregational annual meeting had not gone her way. She was no stranger to discord, but she took her promises to the congregation seriously. She knew her voice would be heard and respected, and because she was able to speak up and speak her difference, the ultimate path that the congregation took would be a stronger, better path. And that's what we are proposing to do as a congregation, to find a middle path in this age of unraveling. Let us do so together. Amen.